Hello, I'm just gonna be showing how I animate. I apologize if you can't hear for any reason, but it should work. So, um, let's just, so, kind of the basics of it, and this can work for like cats, humans, anything, is with movement, you always want to start simple and see over here the timeline. You should always have a timeline, and most programs that are nice to animators will have this timeline that you can add folders over. Um, and you can hide it and you can make it smaller and stuff, but it should just have a timeline even if you can't hide it or make it smaller. And you should be able to put layers over it to some degree. Um, so I guess it's time to get into it. And um, if your program doesn't allow you to add more frames like this, but it allows you to decrease the frames, or if it doesn't, start with 100 frames. And if you want to post it somewhere, you can put it in an editor and like chop the length that's not moving or doing anything off. But most should be able to let you add more frames and decrease frames. So to jump right into it, I have mine set to 24 frames per second. The program should have something right here that says frame rate, and you can have it to pretty much any number that's not like a triple digit number. A lot of people do 8 or 10, but 24 is kind of like I guess people call it the professional frame rate. I don't know. Um, but that's because you can animate on 2s, 3s, and 4s, but you can also animate on 1s as well, and you can mix them. And the reason why that's amazing and why it's good is because if you want to animate at 8 frames per second, you can just do the math. So like 12 divided by 8 or whatever, and animate on that number of frames to get 12 frames per second. While if you want a bit to be on 8 frames per second, sorry. If you want it to be on a certain specific frame per second number, like 4 FPS for some reason, but then you want to jump in the same animation to 12 FPS and then 24 FPS, it makes it easier to be able to animate on 2s, 3s, 4s, and any number. Um, the only thing you have to keep in mind is 24 frames is 1 second. So if you have like a huge fight scene that's only going on in like 15 frames, that's gonna be very short. So to actually animate something, everyone knows like the ball bouncing, so I don't really want to animate that. This is something that people often don't know, and it's easier to demonstrate with this. Oh, hello, I'm doing good today. How are you? Um, I don't often check the chat, sorry. We start with this. Um, like if it's like a tail or something. And what makes it easier, oh yeah, onion skinning should be turned on, and most programs should have onion scanning. Some people don't follow the arc, which can make it smoother, and people overuse frames a lot. So you make it go up here, and then you make it go there, and then you make it go there, but then you have to add in-betweens to make it look smooth like this. But on different frames, of course. The problem with that is that if you overuse frames, it can make things look off model quickly, but it's also a lot more work. So I prefer, especially getting the basics down, to use the most minimal frames to get a smooth look. And people like Day, which I can link at the end of the stream, do this very well, and I highly suggest studying their work. And I'm gonna keep this stream public, and I'm not gonna delete it like I usually do. Um, I'm just turning up the stabilization a bit. So pretty much following an arc like this, make it smooth. Um, I'm just gonna go pretty quickly, so this is not gonna be my best work. So I apologize. Um, in case chat's not looking. So then we have it like this, and then you can have a taper off like that. And see, that seems pretty smooth. It's like a smooth, it goes away. But if you want it to flip up at some point, because in reality, like, tails don't necessarily like flip up like that. If it's just walking away, but it does make it look more dynamic and a little bit cooler, in my opinion, is to not like overuse frames a bunch and overthink it, because you'll know when you play it if you need more frames, of course. And sometimes taking away frames actually makes it easier for a quick movement and stuff. Um, it makes it look smoother to take away frames too. I'm gonna lift that part up. It's giving me something like that. And then it can like taper off and stuff. You can even have more there. Um, the problem with this is that it looks like it slaps up really quickly. And so I don't recommend doing that unless you add another frame here. Unless you like that look, of course. Um, just like another frame here. And what I usually do, especially for smear frames, is I put it on a 1, because I usually animate at 2s. And it can make it look smoother. But if it doesn't look smooth enough, you can put it all at 2s. But if, and sometimes if the middle one, the middle frame that's kind of like a quote-unquote smear frame, doesn't look great, sometimes the first can make it look smoother like that. So, to quickly redo all this, right? So that's kind of just one movement, and there's more to this part of the lesson, kind of, if you have, like, another, like, a tail. I'm not adding fur, because that makes it more complicated, and it's going this way, kind of to make it look smoother still. You can have it do this, and then you can kind of have that taper off. This works better when it's a longer thing. I mean, a longer distance to this point or this point for off screen. So then you can have it spring back up, which is why people like this kind of motion with tails, because it kind of springs back up and it looks kind of satisfying to people like that. And I made a mistake and I put them all at once. um, Real quick, the good thing about this program is that um so I'm figuring out how to lasso these guys. If you have been consistently moving at like this, see there's a bunch of frames in between here, but it'll jump that same amount each time, and it does that unless you manually click off on a different frame to move that frame. I'm gonna add timestamps, I think, because I'm rambling a lot, so people can find more useful information from this. Because this is not super useful when there's too much rambling. So yeah. Again, it's very janky, because I can do it better, I swear. But it's pretty much all about getting it pretty on model, because if you saw here, this doesn't match up, like there's a space in between here, but this doesn't move up. So lining things up to get it looking pretty smooth is useful and recommended. But yeah, so just kind of like to quickly do this again. Um, all that. And I think I ran out of frames a little bit, so it's gonna kind of overuse frames in this, and this is kind of like, if you want it to look like it's going consistently, this kind of quote-unquote overuses a little bit of frameage in the same area. Oh, but I made a mistake again. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'm just gonna not add another frame. So it's kind of like that motion again. All of that. Again, if I spent more time on it, I could perfect it a little bit more. Oh. And then for more... Oh, hello! How are we all? More things, like an eye blink. We have our eye. And again, it's kind of like, don't overuse too much. I'm gonna go for like quick eye blink and stuff. This can help. I usually copy and paste these since it makes it go quicker, and if you draw it and it's over and over again and it's more off model, it can make the finished thing look a little bit weird. Unless you like, unless erasing tiny bits is more time consuming than tracing over the onion skin stuff to make it look more consistent. Pretty stylized. As you can see, I'm a little picky with everything. Yeah, pretty much. That's just, like, very simple animations like this are easier to get pretty smooth with fewer frames. Because again, the more complicated, like a full body turnaround is gonna need more frames than just like a an up and down movement, like eye open and eye closed. Because the more complicated you make things, the more complicated it will be. So if you ever like an eye like this, no matter what motion it's at, it's gonna be easier. For hair movement and fur movement and all that stuff, um, always keeping track of where it's at to make it help look at the whole character still consistent is key. Because if you're not really keeping track where everything is, like if I keep pushing this down and then pushing this down, it's not going to be at the same spot, and it's not going to look, it's going to go down like this, you know, and it can make it look not what you wanted. But yeah. This is all pretty basic things, because if I did a whole tutorial on how to like do a full body turnaround, that would take a long time. So you see something like simple like this, it goes down. And then when you want it to go back up, I just copy and paste all the frames because that gives it a smooth transition back to where it started. But if that doesn't look good, I recommend only copying this and then pasting it somewhere over here where you know that making more frames isn't going to interfere, so you can have that reference to where it pops back up. Oh, hello! I'm glad to see you again. How are you? Yeah. I'll have this public on my channel, so if you jumped in later, you can see it and watch it in all of its glory, I guess. But from here on out, it's gonna be more, minor things, I guess you could say. Um, that aren't super needed. Like, just kind of figure out posing and stuff. Like, this keyframing business here, where you have one, and then you have, like, this. Sloppily made, but I want it to look like that. Okay. So to make that look like a nice smooth transition, what people think is that this movement to here has to match up. But if I wanted to move this forward, I can and I will, if it makes the end result look better. I'm good. And I'm glad to see that you're good too. It's nice seeing you again. Sorry if I sound weird. It's very, very hot where I am right now. And I'm a little bit tired. Something else here is arcs. For a smooth movement, you don't really want it to go here and then it goes here, jumping like that. You want it to kind of have a smooth arc from like point A to point B. Unless you want it like a nervous, like twitch to show emotion, like this paw wiggles back and forth before setting down. But we're just doing the most basic stuff right now. As in like, well, arcs aren't really basic, but it's like basic drawing movement stuff that I want to do at this point in time. Okay. I will say, like, this isn't the best movement, like, it's not like the naturalist movement, because again, it twists like that. But you see how it's smooth because, um, if I loop it here, if I bring this over here, it looks like that. It's that, going down turns. To make it look a little bit more natural, I probably wouldn't have it looking like it's rotating here. I would, um, and I would probably fix this to be like that. And then this one more like this. If it looks okay, yeah. Something like that. Clip Studio Paint to keep the thing going skips over stuff so it looks smoother or worse at times, that's why. And exporting is the only way to see it in its true glory. But if I wanted it to look more natural, I would probably smooth this down by using a little bit more frames, like one right here, like in between these two, sorry. And then like one over here just to slow it down. But that's not really to make it smoother, because it's already pretty much smooth. And just to slow it down so it's easier to comprehend what's happening. And that's like the keyframing thing, since I went from this frame to that frame, but then I added more. And then you can always add more or delete ones that you don't like. Because there are no rules that dictate like what you have to do technically. Because it's all up to like the person's individual like idea and what they want. Um, See, now it's slower because I use more frames. And this can also work for hands. It's not just like a dog thing or anything. It can work for hands, like the same movement, not with the same direction grips, but you know. All of these tips can go to pretty much whatever you are drawing or well animating. And I can um one moment. yeah. Sorry for that long pause. I was looking at something. Because if I replace this with like a hand, um, that's like slamming on the table, it would still kind of be the same thing. Like, just to break it down into shapes, since like human hands have like more, uh, details than like paw of a cat. That's basically just a circle broken down. I'm breaking it down into the thumb here and all the fingers here, not just one giant finger. Okay, so we have this one, and that's gonna be our last one, and our first is like, um, we have the hand here. First, I'm not look. I don't really care if this is not like a natural hand position for like it to be in. It's just for demonstration. Um, yeah. Okay, like this. And what I do is I sometimes, if it's more hard for my brain to break down, I add like what a middle one would be like a middle keyframe. I can't speak very well. And see, this is a bit smaller than that. So I can always make it bigger if needed. And break this down a little bit more. And this is not exactly how hands move, but it gets like the idea of what I mean. And the reason why I always try to look at this blue and this green, and this blue and this green, is because it's the movement. So like, front, back, and then this is in this one, this is the front, this is the back. So if you go in between in between this one, and this one, and this one, this one, theoretically, it will look smooth. Because it's more balanced and stuff. And I'm not really doing smear frames right now in this like tutorial-esque thing. But like stuff like this benefits a lot from smear frames. Something like this. See, again, it's not like the smoothest because I need more frames since it's more complicated, especially at the end, but that's like that's pretty much the gist of how the same movements can kind of work. The same thing like that. Um, Same thing over here. Pretty much the same movement. And it works. Then, for smear frames, the easiest example is something like this. You have a circle here. Your end frame you want over here. And it's moving like this, and there's another one like this. And you're gonna add a movement in between that takes up this much space, right? So usually it's something like that. And theoretically, yep, it makes it look smooth. The thing about smear frames is you don't want it to be noticeable. And this is something someone else told me and helps me a lot. This isn't super noticeable unless you slow it down a lot. To make it less noticeable, if it doesn't look as smooth, then don't keep it. But you can, if you're animating at 2s, you can put it at a 1, and now it's even less noticeable because it takes up half the time the others do. How to do it wrong is if we take another example other than just that. If we have like a paw here, um, and we're gonna put the paw like up, like this. Um, you don't want the in-between to be really noticeable like this. If you're gonna do the line blur like this, which people often do, it's the hardest one to perfect, but don't put thick lines like this because that type of motion blur is very noticeable when you put it together, even if you made it the smoothest thing ever, it's noticeable, especially since these lines go over the original frame, like the blue here. You can see that the lines do poke through, and this one's very close to being there. Um, to make it better, you would kind of move it like that, so it's kind of like in the halfway about the spikes, and move this one over here because the smear frame is supposed to take up a long distance, not necessarily a very short distance. It's still noticeable because of how it is, because of the spikes, but that makes it less noticeable, which is better. Um, instead of these spikes, what I recommend and what I've seen is to just make really thin lines, thinner than this, even if you can. And you can make like some bigger, some smaller and stuff, because it's often less noticeable to most people. And you can even do a smear frame, which I've seen people do, with a blur like this. And it still works, because it's like, again, it's a motion blur. Like that. So, we've covered arc smear frames and like following the movement of the previous frame. Like, again, this example. And then you end with something like we put like that, Because it follows the movement, and you can break it and bend it once you perfect that. But that's it. So I'm going to keep this public. I'm going to add timestamps when I can. But for now, this is how I animate. And yeah, that's pretty much it.